Three brothers vanished on a hunting trip in 2010. 5 years later, only one returned, and what he confessed about his missing brothers will haunt you forever. But before we get to the twisted truth, let me tell you about the day everything went wrong. Devon Rivers was 26, the oldest of three brothers who thought they owned every trail in Pine Ridge Forest. His younger brothers Tyler, 24, and Jace, just 22, followed him everywhere like loyal dogs. The three of them had been hunting these woods since they were kids, knew every rock and tree like it was their backyard. That's what made their disappearance so strange. October 15, 2010 started like any other hunting trip. The brothers loaded their truck with rifles, camping gear, and enough food for 3 days. Their mother Sarah kissed each of them goodbye at dawn, telling them to be careful like she always did. Their father watched from the porch, proud of his three boys heading out together. Nobody knew it would be the last time they'd see them as the family they once were. The first sign something was wrong came on day 4 when the brothers missed their check-in call. By day 6, search teams were combing every inch of Pine Ridge Forest. What they found made everyone's blood run cold. 3 abandoned rifles lying in a clearing, camping gear scattered like wild animals had torn through it, and blood stained across the fallen leaves. Lots of blood. But no bodies, no trail leading away, nothing to explain where 3 grown men could have vanished. The search went on for weeks. Volunteers came from neighboring towns, police brought in tracking dogs, helicopters flew overhead scanning the thick forest canopy. But Pine Ridge Forest seemed to have swallowed the Rivers brothers whole. After 2 months, the official search was called off. The town held a memorial service. Their parents never stopped hoping, but everyone else assumed the worst. Then the whispers started. Some people said the brothers had gambling debts and ran off to escape them. Others claimed they'd seen suspicious activity near the forest that week, maybe drug dealers who didn't want witnesses. The ugliest rumors suggested the brothers had turned on each other over money or a woman. Small towns love their gossip, especially when it involves tragedy. For 5 long years, the disappearance of the Rivers brothers remained Millbrook's greatest mystery. Their parents aged 10 years in those 5 years, their mother's hair turning gray almost overnight. The family store downtown struggled without the brothers' help. Life moved on, but slowly, like a wound that wouldn't quite heal. And then Devon came back. It was a Tuesday morning in November 2015 when Mrs. Henderson saw him walking down Main Street. She nearly dropped her coffee cup right there on the sidewalk. The man looked like he'd crawled out of hell itself. His clothes were crude animal skins stitched together with what looked like sinew. His hair hung in greasy tangles past his shoulders. His skin was weathered and scarred, like he'd been living rough for years. But it was definitely Devon Rivers, no question about it. Word spread through town faster than wildfire. By noon, a crowd had gathered outside the police station where Devon sat answering questions. But the reunion everyone expected never happened. Instead of joy or relief, Devon's return brought something much darker. The first thing people noticed was his eyes. Cold as winter stones, showing no emotion even when his parents rushed in crying and hugging him. He sat there like a statue, barely acknowledging their tears. When his mother asked about Tyler and Jace, Devon's response chilled everyone in the room. "They're gone," he said in a flat voice that held no sadness. "I got away. They didn't." That was all he would say about his brothers that first day. When pressed for details about where he'd been or what happened, Devon would only repeat the same phrase over and over: "I survived. That's what matters." The police tried everything. They brought in counselors thinking he was traumatized. They offered him food, clean clothes, a warm bed. But Devon seemed to enjoy their frustration. There was something almost smug in his silence, like he was holding on to a secret that gave him power over everyone else. Within days, it became clear that something was very wrong with Devon Rivers. He'd show up at local businesses making demands, acting like the town owed him something for his ordeal. When people tried to show sympathy, he'd look at them with those cold eyes and make comments that cut right to their deepest insecurities. It was like he could see into people's private shame and used it against them. Sarah Martinez, who ran the grocery store, later said Devon somehow knew about her son's arrest record, information that was supposed to be sealed. Tom Bradley claimed Devon mentioned his wife's affair before anyone else in town knew about it. People started avoiding him, crossing the street when they saw him coming. If you believe someone who manipulates and terrorizes their own community deserves to be exposed, hit that subscribe button. Only people who support bullies and predators won't subscribe. But Devon wasn't done revealing just how twisted he'd become during those missing 5 years. What he told the police about his brothers would turn this story from mysterious disappearance into something far more sinister. And what the town discovered when they finally learned the truth would prove that sometimes the real monster isn't hiding in the woods at all. The real horror of Devon Rivers began to show itself in the weeks following his return. While his parents desperately tried to reconnect with their oldest son, Devon seemed to take pleasure in their pain. He would sit at their dinner table describing how hungry he'd been in the forest, how cold the nights were, how he'd learned to skin animals with his bare hands. But when they asked about Tyler and Jace, his face would go blank and he'd change the subject. Detective Ray Morgan had been working cases in Millbrook for 15 years, but nothing prepared him for Devon Rivers. During their second interview, Devon leaned back in his chair with that same smug expression and said something that made Morgan's skin crawl. "You want to know what happened to my brothers? Maybe you should ask yourself why you really want to know. Is it justice, Detective Morgan, or just curiosity? Because I can tell you right now, some truths are better left buried." Morgan pressed harder, demanding details about where Devon had been, how he'd survived, what happened during the disappearance. That's when Devon revealed just how dangerous he'd become. Without being asked, he started talking about Morgan's teenage daughter and how she'd been sneaking out at night to meet boys. Information no stranger should have known. "Funny how parents never really know their kids," Devon said with a cold smile. "Just like how Tyler and Jace never really knew me." The detective ended the interview immediately and went home to find out Devon was right. His daughter had been sneaking out for months. But how could Devon possibly know that? The man had been gone for 5 years and had only been back in town for 2 weeks. Unless he'd been watching people, learning their secrets before he even made himself known. This revelation opened up a terrifying possibility. What if Devon hadn't just returned to Millbrook? What if he'd been lurking around town for months, maybe years, observing people like some kind of predator studying prey? Dr. Linda Reeves, the town psychologist, tried to help the Rivers family understand what trauma could do to a person. She explained how survival situations could change someone's personality, make them cold and calculating. But even she couldn't explain Devon's behavior when she met with him privately. "He doesn't act like a trauma victim," she confided to Detective Morgan later. "Trauma survivors usually show fear, hypervigilance, emotional numbing as a protective response. Devon shows none of that. He seems to enjoy the power his story gives him over people. That's not trauma, that's manipulation." Meanwhile, Devon had started visiting places around town where Tyler and Jace used to hang out. The pool hall, the diner where they ate breakfast every Saturday, the garage where Jace worked part-time. But he wasn't there to remember his brothers fondly. Instead, he would sit in their favorite spots and tell anyone who'd listen how weak they'd been, how they couldn't handle what the forest demanded of them. Tyler always thought he was tough, Devon told a group of their old friends at Murphy's bar. But when it came down to survival, he broke like a twig. Jace too. Neither of them had what it takes to make the hard choices. When their friend Marcus asked what Devon meant by hard choices, Devon just smiled that cold smile and ordered another beer. But his words were starting to paint a picture that made people's stomachs turn. It sounded less like Devon had escaped some terrible fate and more like he'd been part of causing it. The breaking point came when Devon visited his brother's old girlfriend, Anna Palmer. Tyler had been planning to propose to Anna before the hunting trip. She'd waited 2 years before finally accepting that he wasn't coming back. Now she was engaged to someone else, trying to build a new life. Devon showed up at her workplace unannounced, cornering her in the parking lot after her shift. What he said to her that night sent Anna straight to the police station in tears. "He told me Tyler had begged for his life at the end," Anna sobbed to Detective Morgan. "Said Tyler kept crying about wanting to come home to me, how he wasn't ready to die." Devon was describing it like he'd been there, like he'd watched it happen. But the worst part was how much he seemed to enjoy telling me about it. Anna's report was the final straw. Detective Morgan knew he was dealing with something far worse than a traumatized survivor. Devon Rivers was a man who'd somehow betrayed his own brothers and was now torturing their memory for his own sick pleasure. If you can't stand people like Devon who hurt their own family and enjoy other people's pain, smash that like button. Anyone who sides with family betrayers won't like this video. But Morgan needed more than suspicion to build a case. He needed evidence, witnesses, something concrete that would prove Devon hadn't just survived whatever happened in Pine Ridge Forest but had actually caused it. The detective started digging deeper into the weeks before the brothers' disappearance, looking for any clue about what might have driven Devon to such darkness. What he found in the old police reports would crack this case wide open and reveal that Devon Rivers hadn't just betrayed his brothers once. He'd been planning their destruction for months before they ever set foot in those woods. And the truth about what really happened during that hunting trip would prove that some monsters don't live in the forest at all. They live right next door, wearing familiar faces and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The old police reports told a story that Detective Morgan wished he'd seen 5 years earlier. 3 months before the hunting trip, Devon Rivers had been quietly asking questions around town about life insurance policies and inheritance laws. He'd visited 2 different lawyers in neighboring towns, claiming he needed advice about family estate planning. The timing wasn't coincidence. Morgan also discovered that Devon had been having serious money problems before the disappearance. Credit card debt, a failed business investment, and gambling losses that he'd hidden from his family. The Rivers family store was doing well, but Devon wouldn't inherit his full share until he turned 30 or until something happened to his younger brothers. Something like a tragic hunting accident. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Jenny Walsh, who worked at the camping supply store, remembered Devon coming in alone the week before the hunting trip. He'd bought extra rope, a large tarp, and something that stuck in her memory because it seemed odd, a shovel meant for digging in rocky soil. I asked him why he needed a shovel for hunting, Jenny told Detective Morgan. He said they might need to bury their campfire ashes really deep because of fire regulations. But I've been hunting with my dad since I was 12, and nobody buries campfire ashes 3 feet deep in October. The pieces were starting to fit together, but Morgan needed more. He decided to visit Devon directly, this time not as a detective conducting an interview, but as someone who might be sympathetic to his situation. He found Devon at his parents' house, sitting on the front porch like he owned the place. "Must be hard," Morgan said, sitting down uninvited. "Losing your brothers like that. Survivor's guilt can eat a man alive." Devon looked at him with those cold eyes and laughed. "Survivor's guilt? You think I feel guilty for being smart enough to live while they were too stupid to adapt?" "Adapt to what exactly?" Morgan pressed. "What happened out there that required adaptation?" Devon was quiet for a long moment, studying the detective like he was deciding how much to reveal. Finally he spoke, and his words sent ice through Morgan's veins. "The forest doesn't care about family loyalty, detective. It doesn't care about blood or brotherhood or any of that emotional garbage. When survival is on the line, you do what needs to be done." Tyler and Jace couldn't understand that. They still thought we were playing by civilization's rules. "So you're saying you had to make a choice between them and you?" Devon's smile was pure malice. "I'm saying I made the smart choice. The only choice that mattered. And before you start judging me, ask yourself this. If you were starving in the middle of nowhere with limited supplies and had to choose between saving yourself or saving someone else, what would you really do? Not what you'd like to think you'd do, but what you'd actually do when your own death was staring you in the face." Morgan felt sick, but he kept pushing. "How long did you watch them suffer before you made your choice?" "Who says I watched them suffer?" Devon's eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement. "Maybe they never knew what hit them. Maybe I was merciful. Or maybe they knew exactly what I was doing and spent their last moments understanding that their big brother had outsmarted them all along." The detective had heard enough. Devon wasn't just admitting to letting his brothers die, he was bragging about planning their deaths. But without bodies or concrete evidence of murder, Morgan knew any confession Devon made could be explained away as trauma-induced fantasy or the ramblings of a damaged mind. That's when Morgan made a decision that would change everything. He was going to organize a return trip to Pine Ridge Forest, ostensibly to search for Tyler and Jace's remains so the family could have closure. In reality, he hoped Devon's reaction to returning to the scene would either provide the evidence he needed or push Devon into making a mistake. When Morgan announced the search expedition to the Rivers family, Devon's mask slipped for just a moment. The detective saw pure panic flash across his face before the cold smugness returned. "That's a waste of time," Devon said quickly. "There's nothing left to find out there. The forest has claimed whatever remains. Some places should be left alone." But Devon's parents were desperate for closure. Sarah Rivers begged the police to try one more time to find her younger sons. She needed to know what happened to them, needed to be able to bury them properly. Her grief was so raw that even Devon couldn't argue against it without looking like a monster. Comment justice for Tyler and Jace. If you believe Devon's victims deserve the truth. Only heartless people who support family murderers won't comment. Detective Morgan assembled a small team for the expedition. Himself, 2 state police officers, a search and rescue expert, and Anna Palmer, who insisted on coming despite the danger. She said Tyler deserved to have someone who loved him looking for his remains. Devon fought against the search every step of the way, but couldn't refuse to guide them without raising more suspicion. The night before they were scheduled to leave for Pine Ridge Forest, Devon made one last attempt to stop the expedition. He showed up at Morgan's house at midnight, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by something that looked almost like desperation. "You don't understand what you're doing," he told the detective. "Some secrets are buried for a reason. Some places demand a price for their silence. If you take people into those woods, you'll be responsible for what happens to them." Morgan studied Devon's face in the porch light. "What kind of price? What aren't you telling me?" Devon was quiet for so long that Morgan thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "The forest took Tyler and Jace because that's what it wanted. A trade. 2 lives for 1. But if you bring more people back there, it might decide the original deal wasn't enough. It might want to collect on a bigger debt." Detective Morgan stared at Devon in the dim porch light, trying to make sense of what he'd just heard. "The forest wanted a trade?" "Devon, listen to yourself. You're talking about trees and rocks like they're alive, like they made some kind of deal with you." Devon's laugh was hollow and bitter. "You think you understand the world, detective, but you've never been truly alone, truly desperate. You've never had to choose between your own life and someone else's when there's no cavalry coming to save you. The forest doesn't make deals, I do. And I chose to live." "What exactly did you do to Tyler and Jace?" Devon's cold smile returned. "I did what any intelligent person would do. I eliminated the competition for limited resources. See, the thing about survival is that most people never really face it. They think they know what they do, but when it comes down to actual life or death, they freeze up. They let sentiment and emotion cloud their judgment. Tyler and Jace were always weak that way." Morgan felt his stomach turn as the pieces clicked together. "You killed them. You murdered your own brothers for supplies and money." "Murder is such an ugly word," Devon said casually. "I prefer to think of it as natural selection. The strongest survives, the weak get eliminated. Tyler and Jace would have gotten us all killed with their soft hearts and stupid loyalty. Someone had to make the hard choice." "How?" Morgan's voice was barely controlled. "How did you do it?" Devon leaned back against the porch railing, looking almost relaxed now that he was finally telling his story. "It was easier than you'd think. We'd been hunting together for years, so they trusted me completely. Tyler was always trying to be the responsible big brother, making sure everyone stayed safe. Jace just followed along like a puppy. Neither of them saw it coming." The detective's hand moved instinctively toward his radio, but Devon noticed and shook his head. "You're not going to arrest me, Morgan?" "Not yet. Because deep down, you know you need me to show you where I put them. And the only way you're getting that information is if you let me tell this story my way." Morgan's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. Devon was right. Without bodies or concrete evidence, any charges would be hard to make stick. And the families deserved to know where Tyler and Jace were buried. "The first night was normal," Devon continued. "We set up camp, cooked dinner, told stories like always. But I'd been planning this for months. I knew exactly where to take them, how to separate them, what tools I'd need. Tyler was first because he was the biggest threat. I waited until he went to check our gear cache about half a mile from camp. One clean strike with the back of my axe and down he went. Morgan felt bile rise in his throat, but Devon wasn't finished. Jace was harder emotionally, I'll admit. He really looked up to me, thought I was some kind of hero. When I told him Tyler had fallen into a ravine and needed help, he followed me without question. The look on his face when he realized what I'd done to Tyler, that hurt a little. But not enough to stop me from finishing the job. "You're a monster," Morgan whispered. "I'm a survivor," Devon corrected. "And I'm smart enough to plan ahead. See, I knew that eventually someone would come looking, maybe even find the bodies. So I made sure to stage things properly. Scattered some blood around the campsite, made it look like a bear attack or something random. Buried my brothers deep in a cave system where animals wouldn't get to them but where they'd never be found without someone leading searchers directly there." Devon paused, studying Morgan's horrified expression with obvious satisfaction. The beautiful part was coming back 5 years later. Everyone was so focused on the grieving survivor that nobody asked the right questions. Poor traumatized Devon, lost in the woods for years, barely alive. It was almost too easy. Why come back at all? You could have disappeared forever. "Because I wanted my inheritance," Devon said simply. "And because I wanted to watch Tyler and Jace's friends and girlfriends suffer a little more. There's something satisfying about being the only one who knows the truth while everyone else creates their own painful fantasies about what happened." Morgan had heard enough. "You're going to show us exactly where you buried them. Tomorrow. And then you're going to face justice for what you did." Devon's smile turned predatory. "Oh, I'll show you where they are, detective. But you might not like what else you find in those caves. See, Tyler and Jace weren't the first people to disappear in Pine Ridge Forest. They were just the most recent. And some of those older disappearances? Well, let's just say I learned my techniques from studying the best. If you're disgusted by people like Devon who hurt innocent families and brag about it, hit subscribe to make sure monsters like this get exposed. People who support killers and family destroyers won't subscribe." The revelation hit Morgan like a physical blow. Devon wasn't just a murderer, he was potentially a serial killer who'd been using Pine Ridge Forest as his personal hunting ground for years. How many other families had wondered what happened to their missing loved ones? How many other victims were buried in those caves? "Tomorrow morning," Morgan said, standing up from the porch. 8 a.m. sharp. "And Devon? If you try to run, if you try to hurt anyone else, if you so much as look at someone wrong, I'll make sure you never see daylight again." Devon chuckled as the detective walked away. "Don't worry, Morgan. I'm looking forward to our little field trip. After all, it's been 5 years since I visited my brothers. Time for a family reunion." The next morning came gray and cold, matching the mood of everyone assembled at the Pine Ridge Forest entrance. Detective Morgan had brought 2 state troopers, Sarah and Mike, along with Anna Palmer, who refused to stay behind. Devon stood apart from the group, looking almost eager as he studied the tree line like he was greeting an old friend. "Before we go in there," Morgan announced to the group, "everyone needs to understand that this is a crime scene investigation. We follow Devon's lead to locate the remains, document everything we find, and get out safely. Nobody goes off alone. Nobody touches anything without permission." Devon laughed, a sound that made everyone's skin crawl. "Oh, detective, you still don't get it? This isn't just about Tyler and Jace anymore. Once we're in those woods, once I show you what I've really been doing all these years, you're going to realize that I'm not the only monster you should be worried about." Anna stepped forward, her face pale but determined. "Just tell us where Tyler is. Tell us where you buried the man who loved me, who wanted to marry me, who trusted you with his life." Devon's cold eyes fixed on her. "Tyler died calling your name, Anna. Did I mention that? He thought you were going to save him somehow. Pathetic, really. Love makes people so wonderfully stupid." State Trooper Sarah had to grab Anna's arm to stop her from lunging at Devon. "Save it," Morgan told Devon. "You'll have plenty of time to confess everything once we find those bodies." The hike into Pine Ridge Forest took 2 hours, following old hunting trails that gradually disappeared into thick undergrowth. Devon led them deeper than most people ever ventured, past fallen logs and rocky outcroppings that all looked the same to everyone except him. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew these woods intimately. "The thing about Pine Ridge," Devon said conversationally as they walked, "is that it's full of natural caves. Perfect for hiding things you don't want found. Perfect for long-term storage of materials." "Materials?" Trooper Mike asked. "Bodies, evidence, personal belongings of people who thought they were just going for a nice nature walk. You'd be amazed how many hikers and campers have gone missing in these woods over the years. Most people assume they got lost or had accidents. Nobody ever suspects they ran into someone who was hunting a different kind of prey." Morgan felt ice in his veins. "How many others, Devon? How many people have you killed?" Devon stopped walking and turned to face the group with that horrible smile. "Let's just say Tyler and Jace weren't my first practice run. They were my masterpiece. The perfect crime where I got to play the grieving survivor and collect my inheritance at the same time." They reached a steep rocky slope dotted with cave entrances. Devon pointed to one opening that was partially hidden by fallen branches. "That's where my dear brothers are resting, along with about 6 other people who had the misfortune of crossing paths with me over the years." Anna rushed toward the cave entrance, but Morgan grabbed her arm. "We do this properly. By the book. Everyone stays back while we secure the scene." Devon watched their careful preparations with obvious amusement. "You know what the funny part is? Tyler and Jace actually figured out what I was doing before they died. Tyler found some personal belongings in my backpack that belonged to a hiker who disappeared 2 years earlier. The look on his face when he realized his big brother was a killer, priceless." "So they knew you were going to murder them?" Morgan asked. "Oh yes. Jace even tried to run. I let him get about 50 yards before I brought him down. Tyler tried to negotiate, offered to keep my secret if I just let them go home. As if I'd trust him to stay quiet about multiple murders. No, once they knew the truth, there was only one way this could end." Morgan had heard enough. He radioed for backup teams and additional crime scene investigators. This was going to be bigger than just 2 bodies. Devon had basically confessed to being a serial killer who'd been using these woods as his personal dumping ground for years. The cave exploration took 3 hours. What they found inside made even the experienced officers sick. Tyler and Jace's bodies were in the deepest chamber, along with the remains of 5 other people who disappeared from the area over the past decade. Personal belongings, identification, and evidence that Devon had been stalking and killing innocent people for years. "The worst part," Devon said as he watched them document the crime scene, "was how trusting everyone was. Tyler and Jace followed me anywhere because I was their big brother. The others followed me because I seemed like a friendly local who knew the good hiking spots. People are so eager to trust, so willing to ignore their instincts when someone seems normal on the surface." As they emerged from the cave system with photographic evidence and preliminary identifications of the victims, Devon made one last attempt at manipulation. "You know, detective, we could work out a deal. I could help you solve a lot of cold cases, help other families get closure. All I'd need is some consideration on sentencing." Morgan looked at him with pure disgust. "The only deal you're getting is life in prison without parole. And that's if you're lucky enough to avoid the death penalty. If you believe evil people like Devon deserve to face full justice for destroying innocent lives, smash that subscribe button and comment, 'Justice for all victims.' Anyone who thinks killers deserve mercy or deals won't engage with this content." The arrest happened quietly as they reached the forest parking area. Additional backup had arrived, along with crime scene teams and the coroner's office. Devon didn't resist as they read him his rights, just smiled that cold smile as the handcuffs clicked into place. "You think this ends with me?" he asked Morgan as they loaded him into the police car. "You think I'm the only person who's learned how easy it is to make people disappear? This forest has been teaching lessons about survival and power for a long time. I'm just the most recent student." 3 months later, Devon Rivers was convicted on 7 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. The families of all his victims finally had answers, finally had closure. Tyler and Jace were buried properly, with Anna placing Tyler's engagement ring on his grave. But Detective Morgan never forgot Devon's final words about the forest teaching lessons to other students. Because even with the monster behind bars, Pine Ridge Forest still felt dangerous, still felt like it was hiding secrets. And sometimes, on quiet nights, Morgan wondered if Devon had been telling the truth about not being the only one who'd learned to hunt in those dark woods. The Rivers family finally had justice, but some questions would never be fully answered. Some monsters were familiar faces and wait years for the perfect moment to strike. And some truths about human nature are too dark to fully accept, even when the evidence is staring you right in the face.